Were you going to say something earlier?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I was
Yeah.
there was a mix up there on the colors. The Union was blue and the Confederacy was gray.
Oh,
Yeah,
whoops.
that's what I
Right.
thought too.
My
Yes,
bad.
same. The
I'm
Columbus Blue Jackets
yeah,
are
that's right.
they would be a Union team.
That's right. Let's see. Oh yeah, first state to secede, South Carolina, 1861. I always remember this because Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860, and then the war starts after he takes office in 1861. And like a Pavlov I have is there were two presidents that were elected in a 60 year that were both assassinated. Abraham Lincoln elected in 1860 was assassinated, and then John F. Kennedy, who was elected in 1960, 100 years later, was also assassinated. The last state to secede is going to be Tennessee, which was one of those border states. Tennessee's nickname was the Volunteer State, and that has to do with like the soldiers in Tennessee like volunteering, and they volunteered for like both sides. So Tennessee was whack. They were the last ones to leave, and they were the first ones to rejoin. So in terms of like last one to go, first one to come back, Tennessee was very confused. They wanted to go, and then they wanted to come back. And then the last state to rejoin is going to be Georgia. And I believe they don't rejoin until 1870. And a lot of that is they really got shafted in the war, and it took a long time to rebuild. Your Union general, big one is going to be Ulysses S. Grant, who will eventually be elected president. You need to know the name Meade. Meade is who you need to associate, especially in Jeopardy, with Gettysburg. He was the general in charge of the victory at Gettysburg. You should also know the name McClellan, who is the general who is retired after Antietam or Antietam. So Antietam, which is the single bloodiest day of fighting, he at that point at Antietam, McClellan could have pursued the Confederate troops and essentially finished the war if he had shown no mercy. But McClellan shows mercy and allows the Confederate troops to retreat. And in doing so, the war is prolonged. So after that, Lincoln is like, no, you're done. We're going to replace you. And then Meade essentially comes on board and takes over. Another name you need to know, which I'm sure most of you do for trivia purposes, is Sherman. He's the one who's going to burn his way through Atlanta and through a lot of Georgia. And then finally, the admiral you need to know is Farragut, and he is the admiral who captures Mobile Bay. And if any of you have gone to Washington, D.C., they have a bunch of stuff in D.C. named after Farragut. On the Confederate side, we have Robert E. Lee, which you all know. Stonewall Jackson is famously, that the crazy general. He's the victor at Shenandoah Valley. He is going to get injured at Chancellorsville, and so if you ever see a clue about Battle of Chancellorsville, Confederate general, they're probably a Confederate general who gets injured. They're probably asking about Stonewall Jackson in that case. Jube Early, and then James Longstreet, whose nickname was Old Warhorse. I think in terms of Jeopardy Pavlov, you don't really need to worry too much about the Confederate generals beyond Lee and Stonewall Jackson. Those are the two you really need to know. But fun fact, James Longstreet was apparently really like all these generals were all like best friends with each other because there's like a small group of them during that time. And James Longstreet was a groomsman in Ulysses S. Grant's wedding, and then eventually has to surrender to him a few years later, which is awkward. Then you have Union guerrillas. So these were known as Jayhawkers. That's the thing that comes up. And pop quiz, Kia, what university is associated with the Jayhawks?
I have no idea.
Anyone?
Kansas.
Kansas.
Yes, Kansas. The Kansas Jayhawks. University of Kansas, very known for its basketball team. Where does their team name, the Jayhawks, come from? It comes from Civil War Union guerrilla soldiers were known as Jayhawkers. And then on the Confederate side, their guerrilla soldiers were known as bushwhackers. So Jayhawkers and bushwhackers. Battles that you need to know for Jeopardy include, oh my God, it's already been 7 minutes. I've had a stopwatch running. Okay. The incident that ignites the war is going to be the firing on Fort Sumter, South Carolina. And as we mentioned before, starts in 1861. The first battles are going to be the Battle of Bull Run, also known as First and Second Manassas. They take place in Manassas, Virginia. The Union calls them the Battle of Bull Run. The Confederacy knows them Manassas, First and Second Manassas. So if you get a question about Manassas, it's asking about Bull Run. If you see any question with the word creek in it that relates to a Civil War battle, they're asking about Bull Run. The largest losses in a single day, we mentioned this, is Antietam in 1862 in Maryland. And that's the battle after which McClellan gets fired and replaced. Robert E. Lee's greatest victory and where Stonewall Jackson loses his arm, that's the Battle of Chancellorsville, Virginia in 1863. The battle they ask about most frequently is the Battle of Gettysburg. That's 1863. So the war goes from 1861 to 1865. If you think about the midpoint being 1863, and Gettysburg kind of being like a midpoint or like a climactic thing, that's how you can remember that day, 1863. Any battle they mention in 1863 is almost very, very likely going to be the Battle of Gettysburg. Mississippi River Battle, this doesn't come up that much, but sometimes you see it, is the Battle of Vicksburg. Vicksburg was the last major battle of the Civil War. There were still a bunch of skirmishes after Vicksburg, but it's basically after Grant captures Vicksburg, the war is essentially on a macro scale over. And then, of course, there's the surrender at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. Okay, so in terms of some Jeopardy Pavlovs, you have Gettysburg. Anytime you see the words Little Round Top, you see Pickett's Charge, you see Cemetery Ridge, that all have to refer to Gettysburg. Pop quiz. Paul, what was Pickett's Charge? Do you know?
It was a climax to the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yes. So Pickett's Charge is that one last stand. It was a really stupid thing where they decide to charge up Seminary Ridge. And it was like, from a military standpoint, really dumb because they basically had the entire Union side firing on them. And it essentially is a massacre for the Confederate side. If they ask about steel-clad ships, which they love to ask about steel-clad ships, they are referring to the Monitor and the Merrimack. And it's the first battle where they have steel-clad ships. The Monitor is the Union, the Merrimack is the Confederacy. The way I remember this is Monitor is alphabetically later in the alphabet, and Union is also alphabetically later, so they're related. And then Merrimack is alphabetically first, and Confederacy is alphabetically first, so they're going to be related. If they ask about a train that's hijacked, they're talking about the General. I have actually seen this come up in Jeopardy before, and when I was researching, it is a question that's appeared in the last couple of years. So the General was basically this Confederate train down in Georgia, which the Union hijacked this train, and they basically ride this train up from Georgia, and they like cut a bunch of telegraph wires on the way and wreak havoc. And there's this great like train chase as the Confederacy is trying to catch the General and like stop them. The General is going to be adapted into a 1926 film starring Buster Keaton, and I believe Charlie Chaplin like calls it one of his favorite films ever. If they ask about a submarine, it's the Hunley. The Hunley was basically one of the first submarines used in modern American warfare. It successfully sinks a ship. But the Hunley also sinks as well. I've seen the Hunley come up a couple of times in non-Civil War categories. I saw the Hunley come up, I think, in season 35, and it was like under a category of like modes of transportation, and the answer is what is a submarine. So it's basically the most famous like American submarine of old times, and it was a Confederate submarine. I do see this every now and then. The assassination of Lincoln, the play he was watching when he was assassinated is Our American Cousin. The Civil War nurse you need to know is Clara Barton. Okay, and then these terms, this is post-war. Southern sympathizers that were in the North, they were known as copperheads, so they were like snakes, you know? So think of them like that. And then Northern opportunists in the South were carpetbaggers because they came down with their bags and they came down to exploit, you know, the chaos in the South. This has come up a couple times. So there was a prisoner of war camp in Andersonville, Georgia, that was infamous for terrible conditions. And it was just there. I think they like treated prisoners poorly. It was, you know, everyone was crammed in. And Henry Wurz, who was the commandant of Andersonville, was the only person executed for war crimes because of the way he ran Andersonville. And then after the Civil War veterans formed what a veteran group known as the Grand Army of the Republic. That has come up on Jeopardy! The Grand Army of the Republic is not to be confused with the American Legion, which was chartered after World War I. So Grand Army of the Republic, Civil War, the American Legion, World War I. And I've seen both of these come up on the show before. Okay, now we get to play. I'm going to read some clues, and everyone's going to get to go. So let's start with Oh, Harvey, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, without checking the J archive, there's one other Union general who I think is good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Ambrose Burnside, the guy
Oh,
whose
yeah.
sideburns are named after.
Yeah, Ambrose Burnside, I believe governor of Rhode Island. And yeah, if you Google a picture of Ambrose Burnside, he has the sideburns, and yeah, you're right. He's very famous for that.
A couple of other notes from me on the Confederate generals to know. You brought up Pickett later, but absolutely have to know Pickett. He was a very flamboyant guy. That's something important to know about him. And if you want to get a really good grounding in a lot of this, the long-form Gettysburg movie that was done maybe 20 years ago or so is really good to give you a grounding in all of this. It's about 4 hours. It's a long one, but it's really good.
Which movie was that?
It's called Gettysburg.
Oh, okay.
It had Martin
Awesome.
Sheen in it. It had Jeff Daniels in it. It was really good.
Cool.
I have a little question too. It might be deviating a little bit from the subject, but you guys know Stone Mountain in Georgia?
Yeah.
Are there Confederate generals on Stone Mountain?
Yeah, it's Stonewall Jackson, it's Jefferson Davis, and I think it's General Lee. I think it's those
Yeah.
three.
Yeah.
Okay, just those three?
I think.
Yeah.
I would double check that.
Okay.
It's good to know the names of all their horses because they're also featured in that mountain monument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Traveler is Lee.
Yep.
Little Sorrel, I think, is that Jackson?
No
Or-
idea, dude. You're going
and then
deep now.
Davis was another.
Oh, yeah. Someone ask about the horses, but not as frequently.
They ask about Traveler most of all.
All right, just to
Traveler,
keep this
definitely.
time, I'm already way over my time. Let me go through my clues that I pulled from J Archive. So I'm just going to start left to right. So Harvey, the category is a war by any other name. This was the $400 clue. This was from July 2019. In the South, the American Civil War is sometimes called the War of Northern this 10-letter word.
What is aggression?
Yes. What is aggression? And that wasn't mentioned in the one sheet, but you know, it's sometimes known as the War of Northern Aggression. Jeffrey, the category for the next four are going to be the Civil War, the $400 clue. On July 21st, 1861, the Union attacked the Confederates near a stone bridge crossing this creek in the first battle of it.
I'm assuming it's Bull Run.
Yes. What is Bull Run?
What is Bull Run? Yeah.
Jonathan, the $800 clue. On April 3rd, 1865, its business district was aflame when this Confederate capital fell.
Richmond.
Yes. What is Richmond? Let's see who's next. Katie, the $1,200 clue. The so-called necktie seen here, you don't have to actually see the picture, and I don't have a picture, but making sure the rails carried no Confederate trains was named for this general on the march?
I don't know.
It's Sherman. So yeah, it basically just like a general on the march. Like
Okay.
Sherman was the one who burned his way through Georgia.
Okay.
So yeah, if they mention like a general like that, it's probably Sherman.
Yeah, there's a
And
Pavlov.
then
There's a Pavlov
Leanne,
for March
the
to the Sea.
$2,000 clue. Jimmy of the Clue Crew shows a diagram of a battle. You don't need to see it in order to get this. Here's the Little Round Top location of the 20th Maine Regiment. Out of ammo and exhausted, the 20th led a bayonet charge to secure Meade's left flank and save the day during this battle.
Well, you taught me that it was the Pavlov for Gettysburg.
Yes, that is Gettysburg.
So I was
I'm
listening.
surprised that that was the $2,000 clue because I feel like there's so many Pavlovs in that clue for Gettysburg.
Right.
So yeah, Little Round Top, Meade, all of that should give hint that that is Gettysburg. All right, next we go to, this is pulled from January 2019. The next three clues are in the category of Civil War poetry. Michael for $400. Edgar Lee Masters' Achilles Deathridge is a Union soldier who mistakenly arrests this cigar-toting general.
I've never heard of it. Don't know.
So logically it's only the $400 clue, so it's the
I know.
lowest.
Yeah. Read it again.
Edgar Lee Masters' Achilles Deathridge is a Union soldier who mistakenly arrests this cigar-toting general.
Robert E. Lee.
So Union soldier, it's Grant.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm wrong. All right.
No worries. Yeah. So yeah, I had never heard of this poem either. But for everyone out there, if it's just the $400 clue, it's a Union general. So logically, it's probably going to be the most famous one or one of the most famous ones. So the answer here is Grant.
I think the key there was the cigar, because Grant is often pictured.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's see who's next. Paul, the $800 clue. Bret Hart tells of John Burns, a senior citizen in this Pennsylvania town who took up arms in July 1863.
What is Gettysburg?
Yes, again, Gettysburg, they ask about it a lot. July 1863, that should all give hint. Pennsylvania town to Gettysburg. Stefan, the $2,000 clue under Civil War poetry. The subtitle to Herman Melville's poem about this man is Mortally Wounded at Chancellorsville.
Who is Stonewall Jackson?
Yes, that is Stonewall Jackson, mortally wounded at Chancellorsville. Zakia, this is from December 2018. The category was after the Civil War for $1,600. Clara Barton traveled to this Confederate prison to help gather evidence of missing and deceased soldiers.
What is Andersonville?
Yes, yeah,
Nice.
we just learned about
Okay.
Andersonville. Back to Harvey at the top. The category is the view from the top. This is a $600 clue. In the Civil War, the Union got valuable intel from 3,000 missions by these, with Thaddeus Lowe in charge.
What are balloons?
Yeah, so this is not included on the one sheet. The answer to this are hot air balloons. Hot air balloons were famously used in the Civil War to like gather intel. So that, but I've only seen that come up once, and I included that. I don't know if it would come up again, but I included that because I saw it had come up kind of recently within the last year. And then finally, Jeffrey from 2017. Civil War people for $1,600 asked why the Confederates lost Gettysburg. He charged the Yankees had something to do with it.
He charged.
Keyword there.
I'm betting charged is a keyword here.
Yeah.
Is it? What is Pickett?
Yeah, it's Pickett because it's Pickett's
Yeah.
charge. All right, yay! Good
Makes
job,
sense.
everyone.
Thanks.
I will upload this document with all the answers into the folder, and then all of you guys can peruse that at your own speed. Next up, we have Paul, and if everyone wants to go to the drive, Paul has also shared a document with us that is Know Your Italian Operas. So Paul, go ahead and take it over.
All right, so I'm going on a couple of things this morning. One is, as you can tell, my voice is a little bit shot. I picked up a summer cold in Vegas, I think. My eyes are a little blurry as well still, but I wasn't really sure how we were doing these. So my approach is basically just to sort of walk you through. I know nothing about opera. So my approach is to sort of walk you through Peter's notes and how I've tried to memorize and figure out who's who for these. But in summary, the famous operas are by Verdi. Puccini is the Broadway ones and the T's, and Rossini is the TV ones. So going backwards, Rossini is William Tell, which was The Lone Ranger, which is a TV show, and also The Barber of Seville. And that was from Bugs Bunny. There were two Bugs Bunny cartoons based on operas. One was Rossini's Barber of Seville. Let me cut your mop, let me cut your trap, nice and slowly, nice and slowly. And the other one was Carmen. Carmen is Bizet. I happen to know Carmen fairly well, so not a lot of confusion there. But those are the two for Rossini that are famous. Puccini are the two T's, Tosca and Turandot, and the ones that became Broadway shows. So Madame Butterfly became Miss Saigon, La Boheme became Rent. And basically anything else is almost certainly going to be Verdi. There's a few that aren't Verdi, but La Traviata is Verdi. Is Verdi. Aida is Verdi. Rigoletto is Verdi. Falstaff is Verdi. Nabucco is Verdi. So that's kind of how I have it in my head. So once you have that breakdown, you can, it becomes more a matter of knowing what the basic plots are. So William Tell, that one is famous, is set in Switzerland. The most famous bit there is William with an arrow aiming at his son's head. The Barber of Seville is literally Figaro. There's two or three operas based on that. It comes from a Pierre Beaumarchais play, but the Barber of Seville, and Mozart has one as well. I'll just check that out. Yeah, Mozart has the Marriage of Figaro. Going back up to Puccini, the main ones here. So Madame Butterfly, it's Cho-Cho-san, and she's attached to a naval officer in Nagasaki, and that got turned to Miss Saigon. Miss Saigon, by the way, is known for a helicopter they have on stage. La Boheme, originally in the Puccini, it's these hipsters in Paris. One of them has tuberculosis. In the Broadway version, it's Rent, and it's very similar, except they're in New York, and instead of TB, you have AIDS, sadly. In terms of Verdi, these I find, to be honest, because the titles don't give me straight access into what the plays are about. So it's just brute force memorization, basically. Nabucco, as I understand it, is about the Jews being persecuted by, I want to say, the Persians, and their liberation from that. Because of when Verdi wrote Nabucco, that became a very big deal for Italians because Italy was coalescing into one nation at a time. And that opera made Verdi a very big deal. La Traviata. Traviata is literally fallen woman. In this case, it's a woman named Violetta. That's based on a Dumas novel. There's a few of them that have been based on Dumas novels, actually. Il Trovatore. Trovatore is Italian for troubadour. In this case, a guy named Manrico. The most famous thing about Il Trovatore is the Anvil chorus, which you absolutely have heard at some point or another. Aida. Aida is literally an Ethiopian princess. She has a prisoner of war named, I want to say, Radames, maybe, and she falls for Radames. Rigoletto. Rigoletto is a hunchback and the title character of the play. Rigoletto was a jester. And Verdi also has an opera based on Falstaff. Falstaff is a Shakespeare character, as you probably know. Falstaff is interesting. He appears in several Shakespeare plays. but this is the only work where he is the main title character. Verdi was quite fond of Shakespeare. He also wrote operas about Macbeth and Othello. Othello missing an H, so it became that was Othello. Other than that, there's a few other lesser-known operas that come up from time to time. Ponchielli has an opera called La Gioconda. That's based on a Victor Hugo work. That one's best known for the Dance of the Hours. If you're sufficiently old, you may remember that Dance of the Hours as Hello Mother, Hello Father, Here I Am at Camp Granada, which was based on the Dance of the Hours. Leon Cabello has one called Pagliacci. You may remember Smokey Robinson's song Tears of a Clown. Smokey unfortunately misidentified the clown. The clown in Pagliacci is actually a guy named Tonio. Pagliacci is a short opera, so it's often performed at the same time and the same bill as an opera called Calaveria Rusticano, which I think means the country horseman, but it's often played together as Cav Pag. Another name to know is a guy named Monteverdi. He was one of the first opera composers. The oldest one we have is called Orfeo, about Orpheus. Orpheus goes into the underworld to rescue his lover and brings her with music or some such. There's obviously tons more operas. That's basically the highlights. In the file, I'll talk about Mozart briefly, because even though obviously Mozart's Austrian, he also wrote a lot in Italian. The four main operas there for Mozart: Marriage of Figaro, which I mentioned already. That's kind of a sequel. In that one, as you might guess, the Barber of Seville, who is Figaro, gets hitched. Così fan tutti, Women Are Like That, is what that literally means. It's about two soldiers who bet that their girlfriends will always be faithful. So someone tries to seduce them both, and things go haywire. We've got Die Zauberflöte, which means literally the magic flute. While Mozart normally wrote in Italian, this particular one is in German. It's notable mostly because if you've got a thing about a Mozart opera with supernatural elements, it's going to be Die Zauberflöte, the magic flute. It's also, many people believe it's got lots of Freemasonry allusions in it. That's actually a play about Freemasonry. And finally, the most famous Mozart opera is Don Giovanni, about a philandering playboy, and it ends with him literally being dragged into hell. I realize that's not 10 minutes, but it's probably about as much as I can do this morning. So I do have some questions, which I will take a moment and see if I can find. Just give me 1 second.
They're at the bottom of that sheet, Paul. I pasted them into the
Oh,
bottom.
you did? Okay.
Yeah. Just won't look at them.
Okay.
Paul,
Yeah.
since you were mentioning a few operas that were not written by Italians, of course, it's also worth knowing the Pavlov, that the only opera written by Beethoven was Fidelio.
That's true. Yeah. All right. So I do have some questions. Just give me 1 second. All right. So we'll go around the horn. There's two categories here. One is the dreaded opera category from 05.
And we left off with Jonathan last time, if you want to start with him.
Oh, good. Because this is a strength.
That means you get the easiest one there,
All right.
Jonathan.
You know what?
lucky.
Maybe. Actually, Paul, start me off in the middle. Let me make a mistake so I can actually remember it. If I get it right, it won't matter.
All right. So sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble here. Just give me one moment. My apologies here. I'm going to get.
I never realized you had lovely blue eyes, Paul. Look at those baby blues.
All right. So Jonathan,
Yes.
for $200, of a village a convent or a factory is where Cavalleria Rusticana is set?
If it's Rusticana, I'm gonna guess a village because that means rustic.
That's exactly the way I would have figured it out too.
Cool.
For 400, going to Harvey. Virgil Thompson's 1933 opera, Four Saints in Three of These, actually has 4 of them.
Wait, could you repeat the clue, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So Virgil Thompson's 1933 opera, Four Saints in Three of These, actually has 4 of them.
Wow, I've never heard of this one. Damn you, Michelle, for valuing that at $400.
Well, actually, but you know what though? It's, if you think about it, I have to say I thought this whole category wasn't very well written, but I will say it's if you look at it, it's probably a component of an opera. So something in 3 parts, right? Anybody?
Like,
Is it acts? 3 acts?
Yeah, acts. That's right. That's right. For 600, and we'll go to Jeffrey. Sung by Rodolfo Tumini, Lita Menina, Your Tiny Hand is Frozen, is a beloved aria in this opera.
Oh my gosh. Can you repeat that once more?
Yeah. So, sung by Rodolfo Tumini, Your Tiny Hand is Frozen is a beloved aria in this opera. This is pretty hard.
I don't know. I'll just say Carmen.
Well, it's funny. I've got Carmen written down, but I don't think that's right. I think it's La Boheme.
It is La
It
Boheme.
is La Boheme.
Oh,
Yeah.
Scream and
Okay.
Mimi is an easy way to remember
that
it.
makes sense. Yeah.
Wait,
Good to know.
what is the ways to remember it?
Scream and Mimi. So the character of Mimi has to be a soprano. She has to have a really, really high voice.
Oh.
So a Scream and Mimi is a reference to La Boheme. So when you see Mimi, it's La Boheme.
Did he say Mimi
Right.
in the clue? I don't remember hearing that.
Yeah.
Rodolfo
Bye.
Mimi.
Excuse me.
Moving on to Kitty. This was the Daily Double. In 1935, black soprano Anne Brown originated this Gershwin role.
Well, it's not Aida, because that's not the right playwright or composer. I don't know.
Anybody?
Is it
Is
Beth?
it Bess?
Yes. Porgy and
Okay.
Bess.
That was kind of another flutter ground.
Is Porgy and Bess considered an opera?
Yes.
Oh yeah. I've seen it.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's definitely sung as an opera. Yeah.
And was that Gershwin's only opera?
And I think it's opening the new season of the Met, if I'm not mistaken. The new
Oh really?
production. Yeah, this fall.
All right. So the $1,000 clue. Actually, this one I think is extraordinarily difficult.
Give it a Lynn.
So I have Lynn up next. So unfortunately, Lynn gets this one. Debussy wrote an opera about Peleus and this woman, his brother's wife.
Peleus?
Yeah. I think that would be Pelleas.
I have no idea.
Ooh.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Michael got it.
Melisande.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I've never heard of that, although I do know there's a Melisandre in Game of Thrones, so I'm going to try to remember that one.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Was this like in the UTOC or something?
To be honest, I've never heard of this opera before. I didn't even know Debussy wrote operas. So we're going to move forward to 08 to a category simply called opera. And it is Leanne's turn. So this is for 400. In an 1816 opera, he's the Barber of Seville.
So that is Figaro.
Yes.
Yay! We win money.
Yay!
For 800, we move to Michael.
Okay.
Donizetti's operas include Anne Bolena and Lucretia This.
Is it Borgia?
Yes.
Okay.
Less an opera question, more a European history question there, I think.
Yeah, I thought you were going to ask me about Lucia di Lammermoor.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's true. For 1600, we're going to move to Stefan. Salome, this composer's first successful opera, was banned in Boston in 1923.
Who is Bizet? Georges Bizet?
Nope. Anybody happen to have a
Isn't
thought
that
there?
Strauss?
It is Strauss. That's very
Wow.
I associate S, Salome, with Strauss, also S. That's how I remember it.
good. Oh, wow. Okay.
And why, do we
and
know
we
why
go
it was
to-
banned?
Dilly for
I think it was racy because it has the dance of the seven veils. Salome, the dance of the
Oh.
seven veils.
And
Is
they were
it
touchy and-
Johann Strauss, Lynn?
I think it's Richard Strauss.
Retard.
I think
And-
yeah, Strauss too.
Yes, it's
You might get a
Richard Strauss.
you might get a prompt if you just said Strauss.
Yeah.
Very
Good tip.
possibly. And finally, Zakia. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Zakia, yeah.
Zakia. Okay. This was the Daily Double. A Norwegian sea captain is a character in this 1843 opera.
Is it? I'm not going to pronounce this correctly. Peer Gynt?
No, that's a good guess though, because that is Norwegian.
Yeah.
It's the Flying Dutchman.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
Wow.
I would have guessed
Wow.
Peer Gynt too.
Oh, you missed the $1,200 one.
Oh, did I? Oh, sorry
Yeah.
about that. Oh, I did too. Sorry about that. My blurry vision. Is it someone I haven't asked yet?
I think you've asked everyone.
Well, let's go back to Harvey then. For 1200, Harvey, around the same time, Leon Cabello and this man both wrote operas based on the novel Sins de la Vie de Bohème.
Just going off Bohème, is Puccini.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for the opera breakdown. I think that was really helpful in terms of opera review, and that's great to remember. Puccini is the Broadway guys.
Broadway
Just
and the Tees.
yes. To speed things along, let's move over to Michael now with the periodic table, and he has a PowerPoint. So if you guys go back into the drive, you can click on the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I think I'll share it. I think that'll be easier.
Okay.
So chemical elements is actually a category that comes up a lot on Jeopardy. How do you guys feel about it in general as a category?
About
So
average.
my mom's a chemist, and
Yeah.
I'm not as good as it as she is.
I mean, if it came up, would you go right to it or would you kind of leave it
Oh,
to
no.
I would
Avoid.
I might try it.
Let's stop in the middle.
Yeah.
Well, I was looking through the archive today, and there were a lot that I didn't know, and I consider this like a really good category for me. So it's very broad. I mean, there are 118 chemical elements, but Jeopardy likes to ask about etymology, or they'll ask wordplay type questions, like they've done chemical element spelling. For example, if I were to give you two elements, you would create a word based on the symbols for those elements. So if I give you iodine and cerium, what word would you get from those symbols?
Ice.
Nice.
Exactly. Or they've asked elemental words, which are words in English that have a chemical element as part of the word. For example, this is a statement meant to convey the opposite of its literal meaning. It's tricky.
And-
What? It's an adjective describing a statement that is meant to convey the opposite of its literal meaning.
Antimony?
That sounds like that actually is a good guess. It's ironic. That's kind of a head slapper. You go, oh, yeah, ironic iron. But so it
Got
helps
it.
you think about. I think this is a good thing to work on. I wouldn't recommend memorizing the periodic table. I would just get familiar with the names, and for me, it's been very helpful to play the Sporkle quiz, which is basically just, can you name all the chemical elements? The best I've ever done is 110 out of 118. There's just those pesky ones that I can't remember, but I always approach it in groups. So I'll think like, what are the elements named after people? You know, then what are the elements named after scientists? What are the elements named after mythological figures? What are the elements named after places? And so if you attack it that way, it becomes more manageable. And that's how I approach this presentation. So let me bring up my my document. Okay. Is this big enough? Can you see this okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Is this too big?
It's good for the recording.
Okay. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to go through I'll go through this pretty quickly. And doesn't include all 118, obviously, but some of the key groupings are elements named after places, as I said, terrestrial objects, mythological figures, scientists. That's a very good one to know. A lot of them are Nobel Prize winners, but not all of them. Then you have elements that are named for colors or have a color association. And then I just threw in some notable element names. And then I ran out of time, but there's a lot more that I thought of including because it's a pretty rich subject. So I grabbed this map from Wikipedia. It just gives you a sense of the places.
Your screen isn't changing. It's still on the title page.
Did it advance?
No.
No, it didn't.
I'm following with
Oh, now it is.
Now
There
it's
you go.
gone.
You're good.
Yeah, I was in presentation view. Maybe I'll stay out of that.
There you go. Yep, that's good.
Okay, so I'll get to these on the other slides, but if you see the Americas have a box around them, that's because there's an element called americium or americium, I'm not sure. There's also europium, there's a box around the continent of Europe. Nothing in Africa, sadly. But at the bottom of the screen, you have the planets, right? So Helios gives you the name helium, and that's named after the sun. The U, single letter, those are good to know also. Uranium, after the planet Uranus. And we'll look at these on the next slide. But this is in a Wikipedia article. There's actually a lot out there, and I include links at the end. Let me go to the next slide.
Why were some of them red in the previous slide?
I don't know what the key means. It's a good question. I'd have to go back. There's francium, polonium, and nihonium, which is one of the newest
They're named
elements.
after countries, Paul. The ones in red.
They're what?
The ones in red are named after countries. So polonium.
So is GE, germanium. I don't know. I'll look it up after this.
And what's the one at the bottom of South America?
Well, that box represents planets. That's superimposed. And
No, I mean, it looks like the bottom of Chile or whatever is filled in.
no, it's not.
It's
That
not.
just might be the map.
Yeah. I would follow the link that I give at the end and then go take a look. Some of these you may be familiar with, or they're pretty easy to deduce, and then others you may never even heard of. Europe, europium, France. France actually gets covered in 3 elements. There's francium and gallium after Gaul. And then as Harvey pointed out to me the other night, there's lutetium, which comes from an ancient name for the city of Paris. Probably unlikely to come up on Jeopardy, but you never know. There's germanium, which is not named after the flower. It's named after the country. Rhenium, that's named after the river Rhine. Then there's this village in Sweden, Ytterby, which gives its name to 4 elements: yttrium, terbium, erbium, and ytterbium.
Why is that so popular?
Kind of a mouthful, but good to know. Scandium is named after Scandinavia. Moscovium, that's one of the newer elements. If you look at the kicker at the bottom, 2016, there were 4 added to the table. The Moscow Oblast area of Russia. There's polonium, which can kill you. A lot of these elements can. That's named after Poland. I didn't know until today that Magnesia is a district in Greece, and that gives you the name for both magnesium and manganese. If you do get a spelling type thing, just be careful. Magnesium is abbreviated Mg, so drop the A and you'd get Mg, whereas manganese is Mn, so don't get those confused. And then strangely, copper, Cu, comes from an old word for Cyprus.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah.
Is there any specific reason why Ytterby would be used for 4 elements? Why is it so popular?
I think a bunch of things were discovered there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They discovered a whole bunch of rare earths in that village.
There's like a mine there nearby or something, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, because I didn't have that on the top of my head, but I do remember reading that. Let's go on. So elements named after places on Earth, page 2. So americium, berkelium, named after... Yeah. Californium. So the ones named after states would be Californium. That was the first one, named after a state. Then there's Tennessine, also one of the ones discovered in 2016. And then there's Livermorium, which is not named for your liver, and it's not named for liverwurst, but it's named for Livermore, California. There's a national laboratory there, the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, named after both Ernest Lawrence, who has an element named after himself, as well as Robert Livermore, who was a landowner. I guess he gave the land where that place it was built. But yeah, I would go drill down into some of these, because Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, I think that was once an entire category on Jeopardy. One that I thought was interesting is Thule, which is the farthest north location in literature and cartography. You've probably heard of Ultima Thule, which is a space object, and NASA has sent a New Horizons probe out there to take pictures. That was in the news recently. But Ultima Thule in medieval literature and classical literature was basically the farthest north place on Earth. That's kind of cool. And Japan, another name for Japan, or the Japanese name, the Nihon. And so that gives you Nihonium, and that's one of the 4 that were added in 2016. Okay, then ones after terrestrial objects. These have come up on Jeopardy, and I've missed them, and some are pretty obvious, like Helios, helium. I don't think I ever made that connection. Selenium, after the goddess Selene, which is another name for the moon. That was just something I'd never heard of. Selenium is something you might, that might be part of a multivitamin you take. Palladium. What?
It's in almonds.
Yeah, nuts, certain nuts. Also Brazil nuts, I think, have a good source of selenium. Then there's palladium, which has been clued in Jeopardy as like a dance club, but it refers to Pallas or Pallas, which is an asteroid originally thought to be a planet. Earth is interesting. Tellurium. I don't know. I forget what the source name is, but I think the goddess of Mother Earth is has this in the name. I'll have to go back and look it up. But there's also the city in Colorado, Telluride, which there are a few different explanations of where that name comes from. But one is that tellurium is an element that's found along with gold in certain areas, particularly in Colorado. That's a ski town in Colorado. Then there's Ceres, Cerium, Uranus. We touched on that. Neptune, Neptunium, Pluto, Plutonium, and Mercury. Just to be super precise, is not named after the planet, but after the god, but indirectly named for the planet. Some more elements named after people in mythology. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and then had one of his organs chewed out every day by, I think, an eagle, and then repeat endlessly. So kind of grim. Thorium, named after Thor. Niobium. She, I think, was the daughter of Tantalus, who's at the bottom of this slide. She was a queen of Thebes, and she bragged about, I think, how beautiful her children were. So, of course, the gods killed them all. And then she got turned into a stone. But she kept weeping for eternity. But I put this line from Hamlet, which is from a great speech. He's talking about his mother, how she puts on a show after his father is killed, but then 3 weeks later goes and marries his uncle. So he has this speech kind of railing against his mother, but the reference here is Niobe because she's always crying, like Niobe, all tears. Then you have titanium, named after the Titans, vanadium, who's actually named after Freya, because one of her other names is Vanadis. You have Iridium, which is after Iris, the Greek goddess of the rainbow, and Tantalum. That's a cool story too, because he all these people were punished. His punishment was unreachability. I think he was put in water, and he could get so close to it, but without actually reaching it, which is where we get the word tantalizing. Let me pause there. Any questions or comments? All right. Then you have 15 elements named after 16 scientists. You do the math. You might have already known that curium is named technically after both Pierre and Marie Curie. So these are some names I think most people are familiar with. Lise Meitner, I just learned at Trivia Nationals. I'm not ashamed to say that, what I don't know. I did not know she was a woman, number one, but I didn't know her story. But she worked on nuclear fission with 2 other people, but only one person got the Nobel Prize, which kind of sucks. So in '92, I believe, they named Meitnerium after her. And you've got Einstein, Mendeleev. Mendeleev, of course, formulated the periodic table, so he gets his own element. And then Röntgen, who discovered X-rays. And then I put in a Pavlov alert here. If you ever hear this Danish physicist, it's going to be Niels Bohr every time. Alfred Nobel, benefactor of the Nobel Prize, also invented dynamite. He's on the periodic table. Enrico Fermi, Glenn Seaborg has come up on Jeopardy. It was a triple stumper, but it won't be if you get that clue. And then interestingly, Seaborg and Oganessian had elements named after them while they were both still alive. Everyone else was only after they had died that they got their elements named after them. And this guy Yuri Oganessian happens to still be alive. Last we checked. I skipped over Copernicus. Copernicum has an element as well. So that's pretty cool. 16 people, 15 elements. And then there are a number of elements that you may or may not associate with colors, but that's where their names come from. Chlorine, if they ask about a yellow-green or a green-yellow element, a sort of a toxic gas, that's chlorine. You've got beryllium. Chromium, you may think is stainless steel, but it comes from the Greek chroma for color because it forms many multicolored compounds. Another cool one is krypton from kryptos, which means hidden or hidden one. And that's actually because it's a colorless gas. It's odorless, it's tasteless, and it's also very rare in nature. That's why it's in the category of noble gases. Rubidium, associated with red. Rhodium, with the color rose. Indium, indirectly named after India, but technically named after indigo, which is the blue dye of India. We covered iridium. Then you have things like gold. You have the elements that are whose symbols don't correspond to their names, right? So that would be like silver, Ag, gold, Au, mercury, Hg. That's a good list to know. But gold comes from aurum in Latin, which means shining dawn. And you have bismuth, iodine, which would probably come up in relation to goiters on Jeopardy, because that's what it's used to treat. But I didn't realize that the word in Greek iodis means violet. And then cesium also refers to sky blue. And then some other notable ones. Tungsten or wolfram is the heavy stone. Potassium comes from potash or potash. Sodium from soda, calcium from calc, lime, silicon from silex. Mercury I mentioned, that's water silver, hydor argyros. Latin stannum. Lindsay had this daily double, I remember. 3-letter science, and they include the origin stannum. She got it correct for tin, SN. Silver, AG. Argent, that's where the name Argentina comes from. Then you have platinum, which means little silver. Cobalt, from the German Kobold, which means evil spirit, and then cobalt is associated with blue. But there was another clue where they were asking for nickel, and apparently nickel in German also means goblin or demon, which I did not know. I'll add that to the list here.
That's cobalt, you're thinking.
Yeah, but there was a daily double where they asked for this word in German that means demon or sprite or goblin, and it was nickel. So I've listed here cobalt because that also means evil spirit. I'll double check that, but it's definitely in the archive under nickel. Technetium means artificial. It was the first artificially produced element. And then finally, neon, again, one that seems obvious, but I didn't know, comes from the Greek neos, which means new.
Michael,
Yes, sir.
on the list of place names, doesn't Hafnium come from the ancient name for Copenhagen?
That's right. I didn't include every it's not an exhaustive list, I said at the top, because there are some that I think are more obscure, but there are others for sure. Let me skip over the quiz real quick and just take you to, well, here's the Sporkle quiz I was talking about. See if you can beat my score of 110. I got to 110 when I was playing it like 3 times a day. So right now I'd probably get something in the 80s because you forget them quickly. But then I put a number of resources here. So a bunch of places to go in Wikipedia. There's a Mental Floss article. And then I just put the NASA article relating to Ultima Thule because I thought it was cool and it's related to thulium. All right, I'm going to let you guys go ahead and get on with your day. So you want to do some quiz questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'll take volunteers instead of going in order. I think that let's do it that way. So chemical elements 1000. Who wants to take this one?
I'll do it.
Who's that?
Harvey.
Oh, that was hard.
I also heard someone say, I'll do it.
Oh, well.
Let's go with the person who said, I'll do it.
That's Stefan.
Stefan, very low volume. Glenn Seaborg and colleagues discovered this nuclear weapon ingredient on February 23rd, 1941.
What is Seaborgium?
No, I mean, good guess because it has his name in there. This is actually, anybody else?
Could it be plutonium?
It is plutonium, yes. And it's for 1,000, so that was the hardest one that day.
Does anyone know so plutonium and uranium are both used for nuclear weapons? You start with plutonium and then it becomes uranium, right?
I
don't know.
There is some relationship there, though.
Knowing, one thing I gleaned from the clue said discovered in 1940 something.
Yeah.
And uranium is the highest numbered naturally occurring element.
Oh, that's right.
So all of what are called the transuranic elements, and I'll leave aside the controversy that some of them occur in trace amounts naturally, but uranium's the only one that does in significant quantities. So anything above uranium on the periodic table will generally have been synthesized. And that would be in or after the age of the Manhattan Project.
Which of the 2 elements was used in the bombs that were used at Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Do we know?
I feel like it's uranium-238. Let me see. Nuclear weapons, uranium enrichment.
235.
Yeah, it's uranium-235 is what's needed to build a bomb.
Okay, thank you.
And at the top of the presentation, I said don't bother memorizing atomic numbers, but it is good to know, I think, the first, 10 or so, but also it's good to know uranium is number 92 in case because they will sometimes put that in a clue, atomic number X, and then they'll go and give you more information. But personally for me, I don't think it's the best use of my time to memorize the numbers. Okay. Yeah.
Do you think it's worthwhile to memorize, say, all of the noble gases or all of those darn halogens?
Those damn halogens for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go into that. I didn't approach this topic from the actual groupings in the table, but it is good to know, the noble gases, they usually end in ON, radon, krypton, xenon, oganesson, neon, so for sure. And then the halogens, fluorine, chlorine, iodine, and I think tennessine is in that group, and then some others. So yeah, definitely be familiar with it. And you can go very deep into this subject, but I think if you're going to spend any time on it, just really get familiar with some of these names because they may come up in a wordplay, and you may, they asked about molybdenum once, which is something you may have never heard of. But if you just spend a little bit of time, you'll, at least you'll be familiar with it. Who wants to pick your poison for 1,000?
I'll do it.
Who's that?
Yeah, sure.
And this is a multiple choice. Used to murder ex-KGB man Alexander Litvinenko. Is it plutonium, polonium, or potassium?
What is plutonium?
Nope. I remember watching the show. That was the answer I gave, and then it was a head clapper.
I would have said potassium.
No. Why would you say that? That's good. You get that in a banana.
Well, potassium chloride is used
I see.
for lethal injection, right? So I would have gone
all these things,
potassium.
I guess, in the right quantity, or it could kill you. The answer here was actually polonium, which I mentioned earlier briefly was a poison.
When was that asked? Because it's like, I think more of a current events question.
Yeah, I have the dates here, 2017. What's another famous poison in the periodic table?
Arsenic?
Exactly.
Arsenic.
An old lace. Cyanide.
Cyanide is not in the periodic table, is it?
Oh, it's not. It's not. It's
Not an
the
element.
sand.
All right,
Yeah.
who wants let's see what the next one is. Chemical elements for 12.
I'll take one. Katie can have this one.
This glow in the dark element is the only one whose name ends in us. And these don't necessarily refer to elements that are anywhere in my presentation, so they could be ones that we didn't talk about.
Oh, the phosphorus.
Correct.
Nice,
Yay.
Katie.
Yeah, that one I like to reference the fact that it glows. Like stuff about states. Interesting. 1500 daily double. Who
I'll
wants
do
it?
this. I'll daily double. True
Okay.
daily double.
It was the first state to have a chemical element named after it.
What is California?
Correct. Yeah.
Somehow I knew you were going to get that in. That was
They were
going to be
asking
the answer.
state, but be careful because sometimes they'll ask for the element, and so you just want to make sure you give them what they're asking for. Deep blue sea.
I'll
for
volunteer.
16.
Oh man. Okay.
I'm not going to get it right, but I'll volunteer.
Elementary, the name of this deep blue is from a German word for a type of goblin.
Oh, we're going to go cobalt.
Exactly, cobalt blue.
Yay.
By the way, really quick before we go on, I had something in the back of my head, and I just double checked it. So uranium was used in Little Boy on Hiroshima, but plutonium was used in Fat Man on Nagasaki. So it was
Oh, wow.
plutonium on Nagasaki, but uranium on Hiroshima.
Cool.
In the interest of being holistic in this preparation, is there a good mnemonic to distinguish between Little Boy and Fat Man?
We
Oh,
can make one up.
Who wants from the Greek for 3,000?
I'll do it.
The name of this noble gas is from the Greek for strange. This one's gettable.
Oh,
Another word for strange could be foreign. Does that help?
No.
What is the fear of foreigners or fear of strangers? Do you know that word?
Oh, Xenon.
yes. Good job.
Okay. I was thinking that. I was afraid to say it. Just
Yeah,
get away there, girl. Okay, got it.
awesome. It was a good one. Element names 2000. 2000. Ooh, this one will be tough.
I'll go for it.
RV, okay. I did cover this one. A word for the moon gave this element, atomic number 34, its name.
What is selenium?
Correct. Just a couple more. The elements, I don't have the dollar value. I don't know why. It wasn't in the archive. Who wants a mystery elements question?
I love a grab bag. I'll take it.
Okay. Oddly, this was a Final Jeopardy in one of James Holzhauer's games, and you better believe he got it right. Oddly, mining of this rare earth element with the geographic name, atomic number 63, is mostly in Asia and with some in South America and Australia.
Oh, I don't know.
So what information do you have in the clue?
That it's obviously something to do with probably North America. Oh, so it's European,
Correct.
right?
James wrote Europium, and the other two both went with Americium. I guess when I was watching, since South America was in there, I excluded Americium, and then that left Europium.
Yep.
Again, do I know that Europium is atomic number 63? No, James probably does. But Braving the Elements for 2000. We're almost done.
I'll take. Okay.
Lynn,
Go ahead, Katie.
Katie.
Okay.
It was identified in 1828 and named for a Norse deity long before it was found to be a nuclear fuel.
All right, so that's going to be thorium or vanadium. I'm not sure which one might be nuclear fuel, but I'm going to say thorium.
Correct.
Nice job.
And one more, the elements for 1600.
I'll take it.
God bless this radioactive element. Atomic.
Americium.
Good
And
job.
that's what I was thinking
Good
of when I
job.
said, make sure you give them, don't answer the America,
Yeah.
because they want Americium. And this is the quiz. Go ahead and play that. And these are the resources. And that's my presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Good
Thank
job.
you guys
Thank you, Lynn and Paul, as well.
for presenting today. Thank you, Jonathan, for recording all of this. I'm going to share this Google Drive in the group as well, so everyone has access to it. You see a sign-up sheet is also in the Google Drive, so sign up for next week. We can talk about moving the time as well, because I know this time isn't the best for everyone. So we can definitely talk about like doing like 5 p.m. Pacific time, which is 8 p.m. Eastern. I don't know if that's better for people. But,
Definitely
and
better
that-
for me during football season.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll figure it out. And it seems like Google Hangouts can only maxes out at 10 people. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 10 people. So we can also figure out, you know, what.
Skype limit?
Okay, I actually have to. I'm supposed to be somewhere at 11:30, so I'm going to be late to that appointment. So I have to jump off this call. But thank you everyone for the first Sunday sessions and
Yay! That's great.
learning.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, no
All right.
problem.
Thank you guys.
All right, guys. I have to run off and drive. So have a good Sunday, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Right.